Well, for more analysis on China's political season, I spoke to Kaia Parv via Zoom. She's head of investment research at FXPrimus, and I began by asking her what makes this year's two sessions so important.
Two sessions is the most important political event in China, and it consists of two different separate events. One of them being the meeting of CPPCC, and the other one being the meeting of NPC. And this year is the most important one in a long time because it actually coincides with the commencement of 14th five-year plan, but also it's the 100th anniversary of founding the CCP.
So clearly a lot of importance with the timing of this year's event. Let's break some of that down. You mentioned the 14th five-year plan. Usually we see the sort of layout that we're going to expect for the next 5 years. Now, we did see that there is going to be for the first time a specific chapter on technology in this plan. So talk about that pillar of China's economy versus other things that are going to be on the agenda for the five-year plan.
I think the year 2020 really revealed the vulnerabilities that many of the countries are exposed to, and one of them really being dependency on supply chains and on technologies that countries get from other countries. So effectively what we are seeing now, China has identified a number of key weaknesses in getting some of the commodities and also some of the parts that they need for their own manufacturing process. So the latest five-year plan really focuses on making sure that China has the autonomy in terms of getting the technologies they need in their own manufacturing process.
And we do know that China's dual circulation strategy is one way that they plan on doing that. Talk about that approach and also how that might then tie in with the US-China relationship, being that tech really has been a sticking point in this relationship.
So dual circulation policy sort of promotes the domestic markets, but also focuses on having autonomy in technology, but also, let's say, in agricultural sector. So clearly, various China counterparts globally have emphasized that perhaps China wants to pull back from the global arena, but China has mentioned that this is not the goal. However, they do want to make sure that Chinese economy is protected from external shocks, such as COVID-19. So definitely, China is being questioned by this policy, but at the same time, I think it's a smart move. Because as we saw in 2020, once we didn't have the supply chains functioning, a lot of the countries actually faced problems in terms of even procuring food.
So I want to talk about some of those issues, including procuring food. That was one of the main issues that obviously people had over the last year. Talk about how the economic targets or priorities have changed from last year compared to going into this year.
So I think one of the key problems that has emerged is really making sure that each country has their autonomy. So as we mentioned in technology, but also in sort of making sure that you have food security. On the other side, I would say that it's very hard now with all the uncertainties to define a growth plan. And I think this is something that the CCP definitely struggles with because they have always defined a growth plan for the next 5 years. So I think 2021 will be different in terms of maybe changing the growth plan, having numerical value versus identifying different targets, such as making sure that the country can achieve sustainable and stable growth while making sure that all the key critical sectors are safe and secure, either they are domestic or they are with reliable partners externally.
And so to that point then, we aren't expecting a GDP growth target this year because we have had a very unusual year due to the pandemic. What sectors of the economy do you think we should be looking at then to really gauge the pace of the economic health and recovery post-pandemic?
I think one of the key areas to look at is definitely unemployment rates. So we all know that the unemployment rate should be taken with a bit of grain of salt. At the same time, I think it's also a good indicator what the Chinese government wants to show to the world, what is the status of its unemployment sector. At the same time, I think that China will definitely be one of the key countries that consume commodities. So keeping an eye on commodities that are used, for instance, in integrated circuits, as well as in green energy will be critical because China definitely will be importing those that's not available domestically for them.
And we know climate is going to be a priority in that 5-year plan and during these twin sessions as well. I want to talk about, obviously, China's COVID-19 response, how it fared economically versus other major economies.
A big difference is between China and the other, let's say, large developed economies is the focus on manufacturing process versus the consumer. So most Western countries focused on the consumer, making sure that people had enough money or at least enough subsidies to get through the lockdown period. China took a bit different approach, which could be explained by the fact that people have about 45% savings rates. So their focus was really making sure that the manufacturing process continues by providing fresh credit, but also halting some of the debt payments for factories as well as small businesses.